Right now on the National Weather Desk, damaging storms, downed trees, flooded roads, and 2 possible tornadoes strike Michigan. Tracking the tropics, is a new system headed towards Florida?
There's still a lot of uncertainty of what this will actually develop into.
Not out of the woods, the threat of weather-related wildfires is still very real in Utah.
When we get some wind, you can get a tree or a fire that will take off.
A look at the connection between weather and the Earth's shifting axis.
If you move mass around, you will shift the location of this rotation axis.
And a wet summer in Maine may be connected to mosquitoes infected with a rare virus.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
And a very good morning and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm meteorologist Brian Vandegraff. More than 600,000 homes and businesses are without power this morning after storms rolled through southern Michigan and northeast Ohio late last night. The National Weather Service says it'll be surveying damage from 2 suspected tornadoes in Michigan, one of which was spotted on radar. It may have taken down a tree that fell on an assisted living home in Williamston. At least 1 person died when a tree fell on a home in Lansing. That storm also brought heavy rains that fell over a short period of time. Many roads were covered with standing water. I-96 was shut down in both directions after power lines fell on the road. And this was a scene closer to Detroit, a park and baseball field underwater. And check this out, floodwaters up to the doors of cars. Yeah, remember, just 6 inches of water could cause you to lose control of your vehicle and possibly stall. And a foot of water will float many vehicles. We always say it, turn around, don't drown. Now tracking the tropics this morning, the Atlantic remains rather active. Tropical Storm Franklin in the middle of your screen is marching northward and could impact Bermuda. 2 disturbances in the East Atlantic do not appear to be a threat to the U.S. at this time. And then that area in the red to the left there, well, that's an area over Mexico that could head towards Florida. Meteorologist Lauren Oleski shows us what the latest is on this area of interest.
We've got this wave that's down in the southwestern Caribbean right now. It's going to be making its way north over the coming days. Right now, it's just a moisture blob. There's still a lot of uncertainty of what this will actually develop into, if it develops into anything at all. Maybe it's just a depression. I'm going to watch it closely, but you'll see all of this pink. This is just really high moisture content. This is Monday of next week. So this is going to slowly make its way off towards the north. It's going to maybe have to interact with western Cuba. That's good for us because the more land it interacts with, the less likely it is to develop into something.
6 years ago today, Hurricane Harvey became the first major hurricane to make landfall along the middle Texas coast since back in 1970. The Category 4 storm will always be remembered for essentially stalling over South Texas, inundating the region with rain and flooding. Nederland, Texas set a record with 60 inches of rain. More than 100 people in Texas died as a result. Harvey caused an estimated $125 million in damage. And 31 years ago yesterday, Hurricane Andrew devastated communities across South Florida. The Category 5 storm packed sustained winds of 165 miles per hour with gusts topping 200 miles per hour. 63,000 homes were destroyed with 100,000 damaged. 44 people in Florida died in that storm. Andrew is just one of only 4 Category 5 storms to make landfall in the United States. The last was Hurricane Michael in 2018. A mandatory evacuation order was issued Thursday night for the residents of Maryville, Louisiana, as a wildfire closed in. Earlier in the day, residents about 10 miles away in the community of Singer were asked to leave immediately. There are other nearby mandatory evacuations as the Tiger Island fire spreads. As of Thursday, the fires have burned more than 13,000 acres. Now, rain is always a good thing when fighting wildfires, but that's not the case when it's accompanied by lightning. Utah state officials say weather-related fires are still a threat, even this late in the monsoon season. Paul Nelson has more.
When lightning causes a brush fire, that fire doesn't always instantly spread. For example, Uinta Cache Wasatch Forest Supervisor David Whittakin says if a bolt of lightning hits a tree, that tree could be smoldering until the storm passes.
Sometimes they'll smolder for quite a while, and when the weather turns a little bit warmer and we get some wind, you can get a tree or a fire that will take off.
And they won't stop people from going into the forest even if conditions are ripe for a fire. When the risk of lightning is really high, what can the Forest Service do to keep people away from potentially dangerous areas?
We don't do anything to keep people out of the woods in those situations. We just really ask that people be aware.
The bigger problem they're seeing right now are abandoned campfires. Whittakin says they've seen a rash of those this summer, and some of those have spread out. Utah Fire Marshal Ted Black says a campfire isn't truly out until it's cold. However, he is encouraged about one thing. He says the number of human-caused fires in Utah last year was half what it usually is, and this year we seem to be on the right track.
We're hopeful that we continue with this trend towards cooler temperatures and some rain, and if that's the case, we should be in a pretty good shape through the end of the year.
But he says we will need to wait until October before we pat ourselves on the back about fire safety.
We were really encouraged by the way everybody kind of pulled together and made that happen. And just because it's a little bit wet, we don't want to relax too much.
The heat wave that's gripped portions of the U.S. will soon be coming to an end. Cooler temperatures will move in from Canada. So instead of those triple digits, in Chicago and Minneapolis will both see highs in the 70s all the way through the weekend and cool into early next week. Meanwhile, that excessive heat warning is still posted across portions of the Midwest and South, including St. Louis, Nashville, and Houston. Triple-digit feels-like temperatures as warm as 114 in St. Louis today. And for those who are forced to work in high temperatures like EMS and firefighters, there can also be serious risks. But officials in Indiana are taking steps to protect first responders. Meteorologist Lynette Grant has more.
Even prior to coming to work, we make sure with these hot days we're hydrating, even before we get to work in case we do get a heavy fire.
While waiting for a call, firefighters have the station to stay cool. In the event of a big fire during extreme temperatures, the department can work with the city to make sure firefighters stay safe.
If we get the heavy fire, we work with Transpo. Transpo can bring a bus for us that we can sit inside in the air conditioning. We make sure that we're wearing light clothes, shorts maybe.
Wearing light-colored and loose-fitting clothing is just one way to stay cool. Avoiding drinks that can lead to dehydration, like caffeine and alcohol, is another way. And with this heat, never leave children or pets inside vehicles where temperatures can quickly reach 120 degrees or hotter. The South Bend Police Department is encouraging their patrol officers to spend less time in their vehicles if needed.
We want to make sure they're in good shape to make sure we can service the community. So if they need to come to station a few more times to take those breaks and cool down and get hydrated, that's what we ask them to do.
And with the intense heat comes higher electric bills because of all that AC use. But there are some things you can do to help keep those costs down. Cassie Arsenault has more.
First, for every degree you can pull up matching the temperature outside, you're going to save 5% per degree on your energy bill.
Certainly, first and foremost, make sure if you have a programmable thermostat, I would highly recommend if you can use one of those.
If your thermostat is not programmable, just try to keep it at the highest inside temperature you can handle. And if you don't have kids or elderly at home, pull that temperature way up in the 80s while you're gone and cool it down when you get back. But never turn it completely off because it's going to use more energy to cool everything down again. Other things you can do, invest in blackout curtains. Don't take long, hot showers or baths.
Try to cook outside if you can. Don't use your oven. And make sure you use cold water for things like your dishwasher and your washer. And last, but definitely not least, make sure these energy vampires, like your toaster or your coffee maker, when you're not using them, are unplugged. Because this will all help to keep your bill manageable, because no matter what,
we're the afterthought, but we're always going to be one of the monthly bills that comes, unfortunately.
NASA releases the first maps from its space-based pollution monitoring tool called TEMPO. This now allows for hourly daytime updates on air quality across the country. That means we can see how everything from rush hour traffic to smoke from wildfires impacts air pollution throughout the day. Not surprisingly, the first images show higher pollution in metropolitan areas. Tempo was launched back in April from a SpaceX rocket. Well, coming up on the National Weather Desk, we'll talk with an expert about why the Earth's axis might actually be shifting. And we'll take a deeper dive into weather balloons.
Well, high pressure is pushing off towards the east, and what that means is we have clouds moving in, a couple showers possible for the day today, especially off towards areas in New York, Pennsylvania, southern New England as well. The rain becomes much more expansive throughout the New England region for Thursday night and into the day on Friday. We'll see periods of moderate to at times heavy rain Thursday night into the day Friday, and high temperatures today topping out in the 70s across most areas.
I'm meteorologist Jonathan Myers, and here's a look at the Mid-Atlantic region. Starting off with the potential of a few showers and some leftover thunderstorms. By lunchtime on our Friday, I think that weather maker moves south, but there still could be some scattered stuff in the afternoon, and maybe even a couple of those could have some strong gusty winds with them, so keep that in mind. Otherwise, a hot and humid day with 91 for a high in Baltimore, 94 at Richmond, 95 to 100 down Roanoke Way. That's the scene here.
I'm meteorologist Vitas Reed. Here's a look at your southeast forecast highs for the day. We're looking at 101 in Nashville, 101 in Tupelo, 98 in Mobile, 97 in Atlanta, 98 in Macon, Raleigh at 98 degrees, 97 in Tampa. So everyone's seeing plenty of sunshine, dome of high pressure over parts of the midsection of the country, keeping things hot and mainly dry, but there could be some showers and thunderstorms that could develop late afternoon as we see up around the upper elevated areas near Knoxville and over towards Chattanooga, Tennessee.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
Earlier this week, we showed you some of the aftermath of heavy rains in California, including folks having fun after the storm turned a playground, well, into a pool. But Leslie Molina spoke to health experts who say there could be some danger lurking in that murky water.
Droppings are just one of the things experts say you could be exposing yourself to by taking a dip in the floodwaters.
Everything from human and livestock waste, household, medical, and industrial hazardous chemicals can be present, and other contaminants can lead to illness.
And unlike a swimming pool, which is treated with chemicals like chlorine to prevent these kind of infections, rainwater, floodwater is not. You're at the mercy of nature at that point.
But despite these warnings, plenty of people decided to go for a swim. And if you're thinking of joining them, experts we spoke to say, just don't.
We want to warn people to be cautious, and particularly with their children and even their animals, to really avoid coming into contact with floodwaters because too much is unknown about what kind of lies beneath the surface.
Not only will you be swimming in dirty, fecal-infested water, you could also make yourself more vulnerable to infections, especially if you have any sort of open wound or allergies.
When it rains so much, things are wet, funguses and molds grow, and a lot of people are allergic to these. And so it's a trigger for a lot of people's asthma, and different respiratory conditions.
If you happen to go in this water, it is advised you immediately take a shower, wash your hands, and cover any cuts, and avoid going in again at all costs.
Really could lead to infection, even things like tetanus, a skin rash.
In other areas, it's not floods, but drought and extreme heat they are dealing with. And Nebraska farmers are really feeling the impacts. And as Steve White reports, scientists say they should expect more frequent, more intense heat waves in the future.
We are going to... Mike Bergen had a ray of hope when the season began.
They said, plant in the dust and the bins will bust.
But the sun's rays continue to beat down on an area that's now the epicenter of drought in Nebraska.
Didn't get the rains.
Bergen had about 1.5 inches in early June, but not much since. Fortunately, most crops here are irrigated, and Bergen uses technology to manage that, hoping he'll avoid future restrictions.
If we have another year compounded on top of this, that we're going to hit that trigger level that was established by the NRD, but currently we don't have any allocations.
What we're seeing right now, I would expect only more of that.
State climatologist Martha Durr says this heat dome effect is becoming more common.
And it is directly tied to our changing climate conditions.
Durr says scientists have high confidence extreme heat waves will be more frequent and more intense.
Need to be planning for those dry times, those hot times, the wet times, and making sure we have those local resources in place. I think is really going to be a critical issue.
And that extreme heat can affect crop development. This year, almost an hourglass shape.
For the heat events in particular, it's really all about the timing. For example, are the crops at? Is it the grain fill stage? Is it pollination? And these heat events are also tied to lack of moisture. So the combination of heat and the dryness can certainly have an impact as well.
Back on Mike Bergen's farm, he says it's been a nonstop job of irrigating while making sure to protect that water resource.
And we want to keep it sustainable for a long time, for generations.
According to a recent study published with the American Geophysical Union, humans have pumped so much water out of the ground and moved it elsewhere that it's actually shifted the tilt of the Earth by over 30 inches in the past few decades. Emily Gracie spoke to an expert on this topic to find out if this is something we should be concerned about.
Of where this imaginary rotation axis comes out at the surface actually moves with time. And it moves because the planet is dynamic. And if you move mass around, you will shift the location of this rotation axis. In other words, it's a little bit like a spinning top. You can imagine a spinning top. And then if you were to be able to suddenly put a little additional mass somewhere, then it would create a bit of an instability, a wobble, right?
Okay, so I'm guessing if every little change on the Earth could cause a shift, that this is all kind of always moving and always has.
Yes.
But we have kind of, like everything else, enhanced it a little bit more in recent decades?
Well, enhanced to a certain degree. The accelerating of the melting of the ice sheet is contributing to a greater speed for that component. Now, for the topic they looked at in this paper was they used a general terminology of terrestrial water storage. So that includes essentially all of the water content that can be stored on continents. So that's rivers and lakes, that's the moisture in the soil, the groundwater table, water trapped behind dams, and everything. So as humans, we have altered that contribution.
What happens when we shift the axis of the Earth?
So the fluctuations that we're talking about from these effects, from the effect of changing the location of the like the water on a few decade timescales, right? These variations are actually small compared to natural wobbling motion of the Earth's rotation axis. And so over hundreds of millions of years, the Earth's rotation axis is always continuously shifting.
Well, serious mosquito-borne viruses are popping up in the U.S. from cases of West Nile virus to malaria. In Maine, a potentially serious and even deadly mosquito-borne virus has been confirmed. Asia Reed spoke with one expert about why the weather is partially to blame.
A dreary and wet summer this year in Maine. But that's not stopping some Wells residents from getting outside to enjoy the last bit of summer.
My husband and I are out with the dogs all the time.
Like I'm about to go in there for a walk, which is pretty wooded and probably has a fair amount of mosquitoes.
Maine CDC experts say after doing routine testing on groups of mosquitoes, experts found some in wells tested positive for Jamestown Canyon virus.
Because we've had such a wet summer, the possibility is there that we could potentially see people become infected with Jamestown Canyon virus.
Infectious disease health educator Dr. Megan Porter says this is a rare virus.
Mosquitoes that tested positive for Jamestown Canyon virus this year are the first mosquitoes that have tested positive for any of our viruses this year.
Dr. Porter says there are no known human cases of JVC or any other mosquito-borne illnesses in Maine this year. This virus is only spread through the bite of an infected mosquito. Some residents feel like there's no way around avoiding these Maine mosquitoes.
I have a big yard. I love working in my yard, but every time I go out, the mosquitoes get me.
If you are bit, you might not have symptoms at all, or you could have flu-like symptoms, confusion or meningitis, and in rare cases, death.
Hopefully for dry conditions, then the mosquitoes will maybe go away, but I doubt it.
Well, time now for a short break, but first, let's take in views of the Baltimore City skyline at sunset.
Well, good Friday morning. I'm meteorologist Phil Kelly, and we still have sweltering conditions through much of the Central Plains. 100 in Kansas City today, 103 in St. Louis. Going to be another muggy day, but a cold front sweeping through. Going to give us some spotty rain showers. A little bit cooler as we get into the weekend. Notice this, 72 Milwaukee, 72 Minneapolis on Saturday, and into the mid-80s into the Ohio Valley. Staying fairly dry through the weekend as well.
Good morning, I'm meteorologist Alex Garcia. Here's a look at your regional weather. Temperatures into the 70s and 80s early this morning. It is a very warm and humid morning out across the area from Texas all the way up into Oklahoma. We'll see clouds and an opportunity for rain, but mainly out across South Texas into Louisiana and into Oklahoma. Nothing significant. Temperatures will be warming up into the triple digits again. I'm meteorologist Alex Garcia, and that's a look at your regional weather.
Well, hi there and happy Friday morning to everybody. I'm meteorologist Shannon O'Donnell. The final stretch of August is here and the August heat is still with us. Back to 71 in the city by the bay, but look at the heat back into parts of southern Arizona. Monsoonal moisture triggering thunderstorms there today. Some of that the remains of what was the storm known as Harold. You can see the flash flooding that is possible today in parts of Colorado and Utah. And that's the scene from here.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
Weather balloons are a well-known tool for measuring weather, but there might be a few things about how they are launched that surprise you. Meteorologist Kristen Clark explains.
Here's something cool. No matter what's going on in the world,
Weather balloons. They are launched twice a day, every day, from nearly 900 locations across the globe. Since weather on the ground is generated within the lowest 15 miles of the atmosphere, weather balloons are the best tool to gather weather data above the ground. An instrument called a radiosonde is attached to the balloon to measure pressure, temperature, and relative humidity as the balloon ascends up into the atmosphere. A transmitter on the radiosonde sends the data back to tracking equipment on the ground. The data gathered provides valuable input for computer forecast models. And sometimes special launches are done in anticipation of impactful weather. Hurricane Hilary was one of those reasons, as Hilary threatened to bring rare heavy rain and dangerous flooding across the southwest U.S. The National Weather Service, all the way in Seattle, Washington, was tasked with releasing an extra weather balloon to gather critical atmospheric data along the West Coast in an effort to improve forecast models.
And thank you so much for joining us. Monday on the National Weather Desk, we'll look at how intense heat in the South is impacting local turtle populations. Yes, believe it or not. I'm meteorologist Brian Vandergraff. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.